it's Teresa back again. Today we're going to try something different, and as you can see, it's from my journal that I showed you in the introductory video, so I won't spend too much time going into the details. I've done that before. I'm just going to recap on these two pages here. This one's Sunflowers by Vincent van Gogh. What I've done, I've added applique here, made it into a collage actually because these are glued, that's glued, but the stitches I've used here: straight stitch, satin stitch, pinwheel or buttonhole wheel, straight stitch again. That is manufactured from a tablecloth. This is from the vintage tablecloth that we've worked from before. Straight stitch here, and lazy daisy, if I can see those. Yes, lazy daisy there. Have some French knots here, but these are all the stitches, or most of the stitches that you've used, apart from the satin stitch and the satin stitch and the pinwheel, which we will be doing in a minute. This page here is the same stitches that you've used already. We have straight stitch. Now straight stitch really is just long running stitches, if you like, side by side, as is satin stitch. These stitches have fancy names like satin stitch, but when you break it down, it's really just a long running stitch. And I think if you can think of terms of long running stitch, it takes away the mystery to anybody who's new to this sort of handwork, and it makes you feel, yeah, I can do that. I can do a running stitch. If you can do a running stitch, you can do loads of stitches. So once again, here we have an area of satin stitch here and straight stitches, little running stitch there. So the satin stitch, it's just the long running stitch here, side by side, to give a nice satin feel. What else have we here? A few sequins, some broken earrings, dragonflies. Here there is weaving. Now the weaving is done with several long running stitches and weaving under and over between them. We're not going to worry about the weaving stitches today. What we are going to do is concentrate on the satin stitch and, as I said, the pinwheel. So I'm now going to close this up, and hopefully you'll enjoy this and we'll have produced something nice within a very short time. So as usual, start off with our little samples. Now, as I've explained before, I always have a very long thread because I find it so difficult to thread the needles, but by all means you have a shorter one. Looks like a skipping rope that I use. Right, so now this one, you need to have a circular shape. Now, if you feel that you can do a circular shape without actually drawing around a template, then that's fine, but I can't, so I need to draw around something to guide me with that nice round shape. So all I'm going to do is stick that upside down. Now very, very gently I'm going to draw around it. Now if I were to use a finer fabric, something that's going to be white or light in colour, I would not use this. This is actually a gel pencil, I believe, and it's lovely. I really do love these, but not for your embroidery. If I take just a scrap here, a little bit of lace, and that will stay on there, and can you imagine how that's going to mark your embroidery? So don't use this on anything finer. I'm only using this so you can actually see what I'm doing on the screen, and because I'm using Hessian as well. Now, because it's Hessian, nice big needle as usual. Now find the centre of that circle, which doesn't really look like a circle there. You can see that on the screen. Look at this bit here. Looks like a nose. Anyway, find the circle, come through it. Now I have a nice thick thread here. I haven't stranded the threads at all. So in each strand there are 6 strands, if that makes sense. So all in all there are 12 single strands in that. But I need it so it shows up on the Hessian, otherwise you wouldn't see it. So in the centre, I've used a knot. I'm just going to put the knot out the way with my finger. Back in. Now with your thumb, you're going to hold that down out of the way. Then put the needle back in and to the edge of the circle. You see that? So it's gone in underneath and it's now poking out there. Make sure this thread is underneath the needle. Now this will remind you of another stitch that we've done recently, a chain stitch, and we've got to make sure to pull these even. That's it. There you go, first one done. So needle back in the centre. I hope you can see that. Back in the centre, and then a little way along, not too far, just a tiny little bit of a gap. Can you see that little gap there? And exactly the same, thumb holding the thread down. And we're just going to repeat that all the way around the circle. And you'll be surprised how quickly you will get the hang of it. Now you'll find that you'll get into your own way of doing it. This is just one way of doing it and it suits me, but you might find another way that suits you, especially if you're left-handed. You'll obviously devise a different way maybe of doing this. A friend of mine was a needlework teacher, and she taught dressmaking and she taught all sorts of wonderful things, but when she taught dressmaking, all the techniques, she had to teach them right-handed. And although she was left-handed, she found it very, she would find it very, very difficult, and she did. She spent hours in lesson preparation, sitting in front of a mirror, trying to work it all out. I don't know how she did it, I really don't. But she did, she did. She taught it really well. So, where there's a will, there's a way. There we go, we've almost finished. Oh, I hope I'm not going to run out of thread at this little bit here. There. And I think we might actually get 2 little stitches. Yeah, I think we're going to get 2 out of that space. Oh no, one will do it. To finish off, just take your needle back into the first stitch and pull it down to the back. There you are, look at that. So that is your next sample, and the back as well, just loop it and snip that off. So that is your pinwheel or your buttonhole stitch wheel. Different people call them different things, so you might possibly have heard these called something else, but look how lovely they would make. Flower heads, nice stem, few leaves, beautiful flower heads. So that one will go on our pile of whatever I've done with them, on our pile of samples. The next one we're going to use today is the satin stitch. Now the satin stitch, as I've just shown you on the sample in my journal, stitches just side by side. Now a lot of people aren't very keen on doing this stitch because it uses a lot of thread on the top, but for all the thread, the amount of thread it uses on the top, it also uses it on the bottom, so it really does eat the thread up. But it's such a nice fill-in stitch that you know, if you have got the thread to spare, you know, I would say by all means use it. Now you'll place this, once again I have 12 single strands here, and that's because I'm using Hessian and I want you to see it, I want the camera to pick it up. But we're going to just in to the side, might not necessarily be the side, and side by side with no gaps between them. So first stitch, easy peasy, along, side by side, there you go, and that is satin stitch. Can you see how easy that is? Can you see what I mean as well when I said it's just like a long running stitch? That's all running stitch is, isn't it? It's in from the back, out, along, and in again. And that is satin stitch. Not a very straight one, however, and it wasn't very straight there either. But who cares? As long as you can see what I'm doing. Now if you do leave a gap like there, you see the gap there, all you have to do is go back and fill it in. Oops. Fill it in, and nobody is any the wiser. So there you go, that's satin stitch. So that is another one for your little sample stack. I think we must have quite a few of those now. Let me just see if I can. Right, so that's 2 we have there. What have we got? 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's 7 stitches that we've used. Well, after we've used this one, that'd be 7. Right, so let's carry on then. Now what I've done to do this with the paper, this is just from a colouring book. Whoops, you can't see that. From a colouring book. I've cut it down and it's 5.5 by 5.5 inches. Now you need a fairly strong paper for this, a strong enough paper that's going to take the needle, and the needle coming in and out and perforating the design, because if it isn't too strong, the paper, the perforations will actually tear the paper. So this is nice and strong. I've coffee dyed it as well, just to give it a nice brownish wash. I mean, if you wanted to wash your paper, which is an art term as you probably know, just paint it over with some water and a little bit of paint, let it dry. But I think as well, I've onion dyed paper, and I actually think the yellow of the onion dye would look nice on this. But anyway, if you can see, it was white. Is that picking it up? So it's tinged just a little bit brown against that white. Ooh. So let's start. Now the calico as well, slightly bigger than 5.5 inches square, but not much. Now once again, I'm going to pin these. Oh, I haven't bought the pin. There they are. Going to pin these, but not with thick pins, not with the normal pins I use, which are quite thick, but with these smaller pins. So, and I don't want too many in there, because I don't want too many extra holes. And on something this size, I think you could get away with probably 2 or 4, but no more than 1 a side. Now because this is slightly bigger than I actually intended, I'm going to put them one each side. I had intended to make this a little bit smaller, but thought, well, if we're going to do it, we might as well do a substantial size. So now it's held down on each side with the pins. Okay, that's good. The calico, now you can do this without calico, but the calico stops it from splitting, and it gives it a nice strength. It gives it a strength for the needle to go. Let me see if it, no, it's quite a strong fabric anyway without the calico, but I would rather use the calico because, as I say, it takes the strain if you're pulling the needle through. If you need to tug the needle, it takes the strain and won't be inclined to split the tear the paper too much. So let's make a start then. Right, where are my needles? So we'll start off with pinwheel. So I'm going to do some pinwheels around here. I mean, these little shapes here are just beautiful for pinwheels. They're already round. So tiny little pinwheel. I make it that big as it goes. Oh, lovely, a bit bigger. So a little pinwheel. Oops, I've caught the knot up behind. Right, so through the centre. Oh, that knot's in the way. Just going to move the knot. That's it. There we go. So in. Now, because I've got the calico underneath, I can actually fold it. I mean, I'm still treating it as if it's a delicate fabric because it could tear, but the calico's giving it the strength that I mentioned earlier on. So round. If it didn't have the calico, I doubt very much whether it would be as pliable as it is at the moment. There. Now is that coming out? It's looking very, very, it's very, very crinkled, and I've only put a few stitches in there. There, you see that? It's exactly the same way as I did the larger one. Nice crewel needle, large eye, and sharp point there. Need the sharp point to go through the paper because obviously there's no grain on the paper, like, well, there is a grain, but not the sort of grain that you and I are used to as sort of using fabrics. And this is great fun. I've often done smaller ones than this. Oops, they're talking. I've missed that one there. I've often done smaller ones than these as TV runarounds that I spoke about. The sort of thing that you do for while the program's on that you want to watch, and then you stick it away just for a page filler. And we probably might use one or two when we decorate our plain pages, the pages that won't have stitchery on them, slow stitch. But that's the first one. So just as you would on fabric, through to the back and tie that off. So that's the first one. Now what I will do, I'm going to change the colours as I go along, because to do them all in orange will just create one big orange blob. So the next one I'm going to do here, and I'm going to do a lilac one. I just hope that comes out on the screen. Now just follow the shape of the berry. I imagine these are berries. Just follow the shape of your circle, and if there's overlapping, and you get a little bit of the circle missing. That's okay, you just follow the pattern. See, there's overlapping in this one, so I'm just going to follow the circle right there. I've missed that one again, so I have to pick that up. It's okay though. And there, round we go. This one is a very tiny little piece to do. And if there are any gaps, what you can do, I'm taking that side pin out now. If there are any gaps, what you can do is go back with one single strand of a different colour and just fill in the gaps, and it looks really pretty. I'll probably have done that by the time I finish this piece. Now, unfortunately, it doesn't look as if this lilac is coming out too well. It's not strong enough to be picked up on the camera. So that was a waste of time, wasn't it? There are. Oh, it's nice and quiet around again. It's the end of a nice day. Right. That's it. So secure it at the back. And that's that. Now, there are two. I'm going to lift this up. Hopefully the camera will focus there. It's so sensitive, that camera. I think that's the best it's going to get, and it doesn't look quite in focus. So I now have two there. Now I'm going to use, I think for the next piece, I'm going to use a little bit of chain. Now we used chain stitch earlier on. Was it yesterday? I can't remember, but we have used it. So chain stitch, I'm not going to go into too many details about chain stitch because we've already covered that. So along this narrow bit of the branch, or it's more like a twig, I'm going to do that in green. And basically this is the same stitch that we've just done on there. It is very, very similar, only it isn't side by side, it's a line. So you don't have to be too precise with the lines of the branches, because some of them are very narrow. So you do what the needle and thread lends itself to do. I mean, you can't do impossible things with some of these small shapes. Now that is the chain. So that chain will be taken all the way down here. Yeah, that's a twig, isn't it? And it will go into the branch. I'm not sure how I'm going to do the bird. There's lots and lots of feathers on that bird, and I don't know whether to do them individually or just do them in areas of colour. I'm really going to have to work that one out. So look, I'm not going to take this any further. I think now you get the point of this. So that's the chain. I'm just going to take that round the back, and I'm going to leave a bit hanging here because we'll be carrying on with this later, so I should pick that up later. So at the moment we have the two pinwheels and the chain here. The chain here will go all the way down here. Not too sure whether I'll carry it on down here or do something else, but the next stitch will be the satin stitch. Now the satin stitch, as we've already covered, I'm going to take the other side pin out now because the threads here are securing it nice enough. Right, and this is the satin stitch. Right, let's start here. We'll start on this leaf here, and I'm going to take it. Now you don't want the satin stitches too long. I mean, that is quite long. Oops, that's in the way now. That is quite long enough, but I don't think it should be any longer, because the longer it gets after that stage, the looser it's going to be. It's going to be too long and not secured enough to the back. Now it's okay if you're going to do it a bit longer and then couch it down or weave through it, which we will come to at some point, but not today. So you see this, they're all lying straight as soldiers on parade. And I'm going to do that all the way to the end. Now I don't even know if I'm going to use this colour on all the leaves, or if I'm going to use a little bit of artistic license and do different sections, different colours. I don't know yet. We will see if it develops a life of its own. So now, so you see that I've made that too wide, so I'm just going to keep it straight. That gap's too wide there, so all I need to do is go back and fill that gap in. That's it. Fill the gap in. It's very much like crayoning, isn't it? You just see the colour gradually appear, and don't go over the lines. Just thought this would, it's just another way of using the slow stitch. It doesn't have to be on fabric. Right, and then we're coming up to the end. And we finish that one there where the leaf starts to shape into a curl. Fill that gap in there because I've made that gap too big. And there you have it. If I hold my hand still, there, can you see that? Now the way to do a leaf, I think the next line should be, the stitches should be going a different way, so you get a nice play of light on the satin thread, because the satin is going in different directions, the thread is going in different directions. So with satin stitch you can actually change the tone, or sorry, the shade of what you're using by the way you use the direction of the thread, if that made sense. But anyway, I'm going to stop here because there isn't anything else to show you now. Using the satin stitch, the pinwheels, obviously running stitch, and some chain stitch, and any of these stitches that we have already used. I might put some feather stitch on there because, as you know by now, I just love that. Might work some cross stitch in there somewhere. Chain stitch we've already used. Couching, now that could be a challenge. And of course the satin stitch. So now there's a lot more stitches to choose from, and as soon as I finished it I'll get back to you, see what you think. Okay, so just give me a while to do it, like several hours, and I'll be back. Take care everyone, have a good day, take care now, bye bye.